Married for the past 22 years and have 5 children. And I work in a drug and alcohol rehabilitation centre in Norwich. Brought up in a Christian home, great parents. There was a lot of pressure on me from a very young age, being the minister's son, to act a certain way, to be a certain way. A lot of damage was done at a very young age. Over the past 3 years, I've sort of been evaluating my younger years, try and figure out where it went wrong, in church and out of church. Abused at a very young age, sexually abused. I'm not exactly sure how old I was. I think I was 6, 7 years old. That was by someone in church and someone out of church. It was 2 people. They didn't know each other, 2 separate occasions. Very young. I wasn't aware of what was happening to me at the time. It wasn't until I got into my sort of young teenage years that I realised what had been done, the damage it had caused. Also all of the bullying I went through as well, being dyslexic in the sort of mid to late 80s. It wasn't really recognised as a thing, you know. You were just seen as being lazy. Of course I went through a lot of bullying. It wasn't physical bullying, that did happen in school, you know, getting in fights and things like that, but it was taking the mickey out of me because I was dyslexic, minister's son, you know, just bullying, you know, just mean words and bad things being said. And I remember one occasion when I got into my young teenage years, I started smoking. Someone in church, I won't say who it was, I won't name any names, but they were talking to the rest of the youth group, and the person who was running it, she said something and says, you know, you don't want to end up like Pete. Of course, when you have stuff like that input into your life consistently, you start to believe that you're nothing, you know, you're useless, you're never going to amount to anything. And I was told all of this stuff, I'm never going to amount to anything, I'm useless, thick, dumb. It was just relentless, and many things that happened during my childhood that knocked my confidence. But being forced to, for instance, this might seem nothing to some people, but get up and pray for someone. I was, you know, being forced to do that, you know, come on, get up and pray for these. And I remember this one occasion where I put my hand on this person and I just froze. Nothing was coming out, and thankfully there was someone stood next to me who saved me. But little things like that knock your confidence, you know, and it's the devil, you know. You know, see, you can't do these things. You ain't going to amount to nothing. You are thick. You are useless. That's how I grew up thinking. I thought there's no way God can be there if I've gone through all of this stuff that I've gone through, and I was just a very, very angry person. I think I had my first joint, and that's how it started, with cannabis when I was about 16, 17.
Right.
Yeah, and smoking I started at 15. I started working full time at 15. So I left school, you know, in them days, you know, you left very young. So I was 15 when I left high school, and I went straight into a woodwork factory. So I went from being a boy into a man's world, you know, just like that. I wasn't prepared for it. I was having all this stuff thrown at me, pornography, cigarettes, you know, a man's world in a factory. You know, this wasn't an office environment. It was I was exposed to stuff at a very young age that I wasn't prepared for and I couldn't handle. I would just try to fit in, so I would do, you know, if someone offered me a cigarette, I'd smoke it. If someone offered me a pint, I'd drink it. If someone offered me a spliff, you know, I would smoke it. And I was just trying to fit in, you know. I felt accepted, I think, by that particular group at that particular time. They weren't real friends, you know. If anything, I was, I don't know how you would call it, the joke, if you know what I mean. You know, I was a young kid, they were all grown men. You know what it's like when you go into an environment like that. They send you to get the tartan paint and all this sort of stuff. That's when it all started to go downhill pretty quick. I was just very confused, very lost, spiralling out of control very, very, very quickly, and trying things like cannabis and stuff like that, it quickly spiraled into harder stuff. Probably between 6 and 10 ecstasy tablets a day, and I quickly lost a lot of weight. I went down to about 7.5 stone. Very ill. Got to such a point where I had to go to the doctors because I was feeling so bad, and told him what I was doing, and he says, I'll give you a year. I said, what do you mean you give me a year? He said, I'll give you a year before you're dead. I was like, what? What are you talking about? And he says, if you keep doing and living like you are, you know, because I was going on about 2 or 3, my dad will tell you, I was disappearing for days. They didn't know where I was, didn't have mobile phones then. This is in the mid to late 90s. Doing coke, speed, acid. I mean, I was trying all of it. The only thing I didn't try, thank the Lord, is heroin and stuff like that because I was terrified of needles.
Right.
So I didn't touch anything like that, but it was all party drugs because I still felt in control,
Yeah.
while I was doing it.
Obviously, you're still a teenager now. You're still your sort of young age. You wanted to talk about. You said about you'd been through some sexual abuse as a youngster,
Hmm.
and that had left you confused about your own sexuality.
Yep.
Tell me about that. What happened there?
I went through a very traumatic experience, very young age, and that contributed to my life going the way it did up until the age of 42.
Yeah.
And yeah, I struggled with sexuality. I'm very open about that. I've never identified as being gay, but I thought I was definitely bisexual, having these feelings or thoughts, urges, whatever you want to call it. And of course, growing up in a church and being the minister's son and being told what we were being told in the church in them days, that you are damned to hell if you think of anything like that, only added to what I was going through, and I thought there was no hope for me. Because I was struggling with my sexuality, I was having all these urges, so I'd go to certain places to fulfill those desires. And I was driving home one night from one of these places, riddled with guilt, because I'm married and I've got kids.
Yeah.
3 years ago, July of 2021, I was driving home from one of these places. It was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I just couldn't do this anymore. I just wanted to die. I wanted it to end. I just couldn't live with it anymore. And I cried out in my van, God, if you're there, do something, help me. The very next day, God stepped in, exposed what I was doing, what I was going through. My daughter came to me and said, have you sent Mum a text? And I said, well, I send your Mum texts all the time. And she said, no, this said, what do you like sexually? And instantly I knew what was going on. Basically, my wife was having an affair.
Yeah.
I don't blame her for that. I want to say that,
Yeah.
that was a result of the way I was living, because I was out almost every single night because I wanted to get high, addicted to sex, addicted to drugs.
So did she have no idea, your wife?
No.
So when you told her then, it was a total shock?
I confronted my wife about text message and the fact that, basically she was having an affair or whatever you want to call it. I just felt, I didn't hear an audible voice, but I felt in my spirit that this was my opportunity to let everything out. This is it. You've got 2 paths ahead of you now. Your marriage is in the toilet, or at least it felt like it at the time. I can go down the road of divorce, or we can go down the road of trying to fix this if at all possible. We were 2 very screwed up people. My wife came from a very abusive background, so we were 2 very messed up people when we got together, and we hadn't dealt with our trauma.
Yeah.
So this was a culmination of all of that.
You felt this was God intervening then?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. From the night before crying out to God for help, and then the next day everything is out in the open. I'm not the sharpest tool at times, but that is, I think, I put it down to God, and what's come from that, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that,
Right.
that when I cried out in my van that night for help, God saw my heart, saw how desperate I was, saw how much I meant it, if you know what I mean, and everything has improved from then. If things hadn't changed then, I was probably close to ending my life. Yeah. I couldn't deal with it anymore. I was broken, completely broken.
Yeah.
If this is broken, I'm about 10 feet under that.
Right.
I could not do it anymore. For anyone who's watching, who comes from an addictive background, it's an exhausting lifestyle.
Yeah.
Because you're controlled by these addictions, whether it be sex, drugs, alcohol, it controls you.
Yeah.
And when I cried out in my van that night, things started to change. Me and my wife opened up to each other. He's freed me from that. I gave my life to God, myself on my own, and I've not smoked or took drugs since. I've not been cheated on my wife, and I feel free, and I feel a peace that I can't put into words. I was looking for a way out for years, to be free from the sexuality stuff, to be free from addiction, to be free from that lifestyle that I was living. to be free from those things that have controlled me for so long.
Yeah.
And it was when I gave my life to Jesus that night on my own,
Yeah.
and I started to seek him. I can't explain it. It's just like,
Yes.
it's over.
Yes.
It's finished. And
Yeah.
I haven't craved a cigarette or drugs or sex with other people.
Yeah.
Them urges that I used to have, the sexuality issues, I don't feel that way anymore.